One of the courses I teach here is called Hip Hop Music and Culture. It's a course that I designed for this school. Nobody was teaching hip hop before I came here. So I've taught it 5 times now, and most recently last fall. And it's too fun to teach. It's really too fun. And it's at the upper division level. So the students really have to write a lot. They do a lot of writing in that class, and it's pretty intense, but it's worth it. And we have a lot of very heady, exciting discussions in class. In the class, every semester that I teach the class, I program one day so that we talk about, first of all, Black nationalism. That's one day. And then the next class, we have a discussion about the 5% Nation and the Nation of Islam. And I assign them some of the songs that I talk about in my book for them to listen to in advance. And for kids who grew up listening to hip hop, you know, they know Wu-Tang Clan, they know Rakim. How could you not know Rakim? And they know Busta Rhymes, and they know Nas, you know, and they know these big names, and they have no idea that these people are involved in the 5% Nation. And, you know, nobody ever knows what Ghostface Killah is saying. That's just a given. But when I start telling them, okay, these keywords and these lessons, they're freaking out. Oh, I never knew. Okay. Where and when the 5% Nation comes from. First of all, it's important to say that it depends who you ask, because so much of this is an oral history. So we can say, roughly speaking, that the 5% Nation came into its present existence in roughly 1963-64. And the catalyst for it coming into existence was Clarence 13X, who had been a member of the Nation of Islam. He was at Temple No. 7 in Harlem with Malcolm X. He left the mosque. Now, there are varying opinions as to why that happened, and maybe that's not something we want to get into here. You can ask Alabi about that. But essentially what happened was that Clarence 13X, Father-in-law, wanted to take the lessons to the street. Things that had been left in the realm of the theologians, say in the Nation of Islam, he wanted to give that power to everyone. Oh, absolutely not. No, this knowledge is not supposed to be spread to everybody in the Nation of Islam. And I don't think that Father-in-law wanted to just give it to everybody just to, you know, blow open this theology. But I think he intended it as an empowering message for young men and women who needed it at the time. So it wasn't as if he was going and blasting it through the streets. It was selective. You need this knowledge. You need this knowledge. You need this knowledge, as a sort of empowering kind of theology and way of seeing the world. So part of this way of seeing the world, or this way of life, you'll often hear that phrase, this culture. Members of the Nation of Gods and Earth believe that each Black man is the manifestation of the divine. So there's not a sense of Allah in the sky, can't see him. They call it a spook in the sky. That's not how they conceive of the concept of God. God for them is alive in every Black man. Every Black man is a God. Also part of this theology is that every woman is called an earth because she represents the life-giving force of the planet. And so there's all sorts of metaphors that can be used to describe both men and women in this particular ecosystem almost. The children are referred to as stars sometimes, or even seeds. So there's all of these metaphors, celestial metaphors, and very earth-based, soil-based, fertility kinds of metaphors. So their code of behavior, we'll use that term, is very, very loose. If you want to compare it to, say, Orthodox Islam, which has the 5 pillars of Islam, they can follow those if they want. They don't have to. It's really not part of their worldview. What's most important, there are 2 strictures that are really important for them. One is, do not mate with Caucasians. That's very important. The other is, do not eat pork. And so what's different from the Nation of Islam is that the 5% Nation starts with the science of supreme mathematics. And in this system, every number has a mystical meaning associated with it. So 1 is knowledge, 2 is wisdom, 3 is understanding, and so on. This number system is flexible in that you can use it in a variety of ways, but it's not as flexible as the supreme alphabet. In the Supreme Alphabet, another one of their early lessons, every letter has a mystical meaning attached to it, sometimes several, but these are flexible meanings. The point of the Supreme Alphabet is to treat words as acronyms to find their hidden meanings. So, for example, the word Islam becomes I, self-Lord, am master, or peace can be broken down to be a variety of different things. Haji, one who has made the pilgrimage to Mecca, is broken down to mean a variety of things. So words become acronyms that then give us deeper meaning into the nature of the world, the nature of existence, the nature of something you just said, something like this. So the bit with the Supreme Alphabet, however, is that you can change those meanings. So you can come up with 7, 8, 22 different ways to come up with the meaning of peace just by the way that you define the acronym. But with mathematics, the meanings for the numbers are always the same. 7 is always the God number. And so how do you use it? Well, you can, you use the meanings of the numbers to find meanings in everyday life. So for example, Earths will ask their children every day, how do you see today's mathematics? And the children will then reflect on whatever the date is. So today, for example, is the 28th. And so they would say, well, it's wisdom, which is 2, right? And 8 is build or destroy. And so they would reflect on the combination of wisdom and build and destroy, and whatever their age level is appropriate to breaking this down, they'd sort of give a little exegesis, a little dissertation, mini dissertation on here's what it means for me today. And so they're applying this every day to everything that happens, every time they encounter numbers. They'll often say the meanings instead of the actual numbers. So somebody will introduce themselves and say, I'm a woman of wisdom-born years. Instead of actually saying the numbers, you'll actually give the meanings of the numbers. So numbers, it's almost like a different language. When you're speaking to them, you have to be so quick with the numbers, otherwise you will be left out. They'll say, I'll meet you at the God hour. That's 7 a.m. If you aren't paying attention, you won't know what time that is, So you have to know the numbers cold before getting into a conversation. Doing the knowledge is sort of the equivalent of another phrase you hear a lot in 5%er culture, which is show and prove. It's not enough just to be able to mouth some idea. You have to be able to explain it. And what's interesting about this culture is that individual explanations are cool. You're not looking at some sort of text and saying, I have memorized this text and this is what this means. You're applying these concepts to your daily life. And so doing the knowledge means living these principles, explaining these principles, and this whole idea of dropping knowledge, dropping science, for example, this is an example of something that comes from the 5% Nation and has been so ubiquitous in hip-hop, the idea of sharing knowledge, dropping science, right, as in scientific knowledge. This is sharing knowledge, sharing a way of life.
So concepts.
Yeah, reaffirmation is a good way to think about it. This is a particular thing about catechism-like lessons. When you contemplate the question and the answer, you really have to think about how they go together. The Supreme Alphabet and the Supreme Mathematics, those aren't catechisms. They just are what they are, but they're applied in so many ways every day, that it keeps them fresh in everybody's mind. So they may be living according to however they want to apply these things, but they have to apply them every day. So it's constant affirmation of, here's how I fit into this world, and here are the choices that I'm going to make to live righteously. When I was working on my dissertation, I had this overwhelming question that I never could answer, and that is, why is so much of this music just awesome? Why is it some of the best music of its time? The late 80s and early 90s, if you take, if you just go, even at a shallow look, the best music of the time, the best rap came from the 5%ers or people with ties to the Nation of Islam. And I always wondered, why is that? I mean, did they have a run on the dopest producers? What was the connection there? One connection, these MCs who are also gods or earths, they are trained from infancy to be very, very glib with their tongues, to be very facile with poetry, to be able to spit knowledge just at the drop of a hat. I think that does give him an edge, but we're not talking about MC battles, right? I don't have any data on whether or not gods are prevailing in the MC battle arena. That would be a real test, I think, because that quickness of tongue is so necessary in the battles. But I think in terms of, let's talk about wise intelligence flow, for example, which is just, it's so constant and so nuanced and so chock full of doctrine at the same time. And there are so many catchphrases that come from his lessons. I don't think he would be the MC he was if he did not have that background of doing the knowledge, of learning the lessons, of reaffirming every day. I think that's a very important part of his identity as an MC. I'm not sure at the musical level, though. I never could figure that out. Like, why is all this dope music coming from the 5% Nation? They just had the lockdown on it in the late 80s and early 90s. That was just the thing. Totally. The first God on the mic was Rakim Allah. He came out in 1987, so this sort of blew open the door for the rest of them. In that same golden age, late 80s, early 90s, you have Poor Righteous Teachers. Brand Nubian was hugely successful commercially, and they were really spitting a lot of knowledge back then. Wu-Tang Clan, of course, has had this huge presence in hip-hop, although they're not as obvious with their doctrine. You'll hear RZA throw some stuff in there every once in a while, and Ghostface, if you can understand anything, there'll be some stuff in there, and even ODB, he would throw some little catchphrases in there now and then. But some of them, Raekwon, I'll occasionally hear it, but some of them you never hear it, and yet off camera they'll say, oh yeah, we're down with the nation of gods and earth. So their influence maybe in sort of spreading the knowledge is probably slimmer, even though their influence as major artists is probably the most profound. But Nas, for example, I don't know if he's still associated with the nation, but he spits the knowledge every once in a while. You'll hear these little itty bitty references, and he's been hugely influential, of course.